The autumn wind cut through Montana like a rusty blade, carrying the scent of sage and distant snow. Clara Edison stood at the edge of the Callahan Ranch, her worn carpetbag in one hand and her pride clutched tight in the other. The year was 1878, and chances for a woman alone were as scarce as rain in August. "You the girl from town?" The foreman, Samuel Morse, eyed her with the cold calculation of a man weighing livestock. "Yes, sir. I heard you needed kitchen help." Clara's voice was steady, though her stomach twisted. It had been 3 days since her last proper meal, and the hunger sat deep in her bones. Morse spat tobacco into the dirt. "Last girl ran off with a traveling salesman. You planning on staying put?" "I've got nowhere else to go." The truth stung worse than the wind. Behind him, a group of cowboys lounged against the barn wall, watching her with lazy interest. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with copper hair, whistled low. "Mighty pretty for kitchen work, ain't she?" "Shut your mouth, Vince Morgan," Morse growled. "Get back to the horses." Quote. Clara felt their eyes like heat on her back, but she'd learned long ago that showing weakness only invited wolves. She straightened her shoulders. "I can cook, clean, and mend. I know herbs for healing and can read and cipher. I'll work dawn to dusk for fair wages and a clean place to sleep." Something shifted in Morse's face. Respect, maybe, or surprise. $2 a week meals, and you can bunk in the storage room off the kitchen. Take it or leave it. "I'll take it." As he led her toward the main house, Clara caught sight of another cowboy by the corral. He hadn't joined the others in staring. Dark hair fell across his forehead as he gentled a nervous mare, his movements slow and patient. When he looked up, their eyes met for only a second. Gray eyes, sharp but kind. "That's Jack Roosevelt," Morse said, following her gaze. "Been back about a month. Keeps to himself mostly. You'd do well to follow his example." The kitchen was a battlefield of grease and neglect. Pots caked with old food, soot-black stove, mice droppings in every corner. Clara rolled up her sleeves. "Supper's at sundown," Morse told her. 20 hungry men expecting better than the slop they've been getting. Best get to it. When he left, Clara allowed herself one deep breath, pressing her palms to her eyes. She'd scrubbed floors in Cheyenne, served drinks in rough saloons, endured whispers and wandering hands. This time had to be different. "Lord, don't let me fail now," she whispered. By sunset, the kitchen smelled of bread and beef stew. She'd found root vegetables in the cellar, herbs behind the house, and enough flour for biscuits. Her arms ached, her dress damp with sweat, but when the cowboys filed in, their boots clattering, they stopped short. "Well, I'll be," Vince Morgan said with a grin. "Looks like we got ourselves a proper woman at last." "Watch your tongue," Clara said sharply. "This is a civilized kitchen now." Laughter rolled through the room, but they took their seats and ate like starved wolves. Clara moved among them, refilling bowls and coffee cups, ignoring the murmurs and sly glances. She'd handled worse. It was Jack Roosevelt who caught her eye. He sat at the far end, quiet and steady, eating without fuss. When she reached for his empty bowl, he drew it back slightly. "I can serve myself," he said. His voice was low but kind. "You've done enough today." "It's my job," she replied, surprised by his tone. "Maybe," he said, standing. "But you look about ready to drop. Sit, eat something yourself." "The hired help doesn't eat with the men," Vince called. "Ain't proper." Jack's jaw tightened. "The lady's been working since noon without a break. That ain't proper either." The room went quiet. Clara felt every eye on her. "Thank you for your concern," she said calmly, "but I'll eat when my work is done." She turned away, busying herself with the stove. Later, when the men had gone and the kitchen was quiet again, she finally sat with a bowl of stew. The small storage room Morse had promised was barely big enough for a cot and a trunk. But it was clean. She'd slept in worse. A soft knock startled her. When she opened the door, Jack stood there, a pile of blankets in his arms. "The nights get cold," he said simply, offering them. "These are clean, fresh from my bunk." Clara hesitated. Men didn't give without expecting something. Why? He was silent for a moment. In the lamplight, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe. Because everyone deserves a warm bed and a fresh start, he said finally. Good night, Miss Edison. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her holding blankets that smelled faintly of cedar and leather. Clara closed the door and leaned against it, her heart beating faster than it should. That night, wrapped in his blankets, she slept better than she had in months. The next morning dawned bright and cold. Frost glimmered on the grass outside, and the sky was so clear it looked like it could shatter. Clara rose early, kindled the fire, and set coffee to boil. By the time the cowboys stumbled in rubbing their eyes, she had flapjacks ready and bacon crisping. You trying to spoil us, Miss Edison? Old Theodore Sherman asked with a grin. Just doing my job, Mr. Sherman. Quote. By noon, the ranch had come alive. Men shouting, horses whinnying, the clang of metal and smell of dust. Clara found her rhythm again, working until her arms went numb. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of belonging. It was late afternoon when trouble came. She'd gone to the pantry to fetch flour for the next day's bread. The sacks were stacked high on the shelf, too high for her reach. She dragged over a chair and then a crate, balancing carefully. She had just gotten her hands on a 50-pound sack when the crate wobbled. Steady, she muttered, trying to regain her balance. The chair shifted, and in an instant, she was falling. The sack burst open against her chest, a cloud of white flour filling the air. Clara hit the ground hard, her dress catching on a nail. The fabric tore from shoulder to waist, and when the dust settled, she realized in horror that her chemise showed through, thin and pale in the light. Footsteps pounded toward the kitchen. Of all the times, she whispered, clutching the torn fabric closed. Jack Roosevelt appeared in the doorway and froze. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved, the air thick with flour and silence. Then his hands began to shake. Jack's hand trembled as he crossed the room, shrugging off his coat. Without a word, he wrapped it gently around Clara's shoulders. The warmth of it and the scent of leather and cedar filled her senses, making her breath catch. Are you hurt? His voice was low, rougher than before. My pride mostly, Clara said, clutching the coat tighter. And we've lost a week's worth of flour. Flour can be replaced, Jack said quietly. He finally met her eyes, and what she saw there startled her. Not desire, not mockery, but something deeper. Concern, respect. He offered his hand. Let me help you up. Clara hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. His grip was firm, steady, his touch careful as if she were something fragile. When she stood, pain shot through her ankle. You are hurt, he said. It's nothing. I just need to clean this up before. Well, a voice cut through her words like a whip. Clara Edison making snow angels in my kitchen. Vince Morgan stood in the doorway, smirking. Two other cowboys, Benjamin Harrison and Grover Cleveland, peered in behind him. Their laughter filled the room as their eyes took in the scene. Clara clutching Jack's coat around her torn dress, white flour dusting her hair like frost. Looks like our proper lady ain't so proper after all, Vince drawled. That dress didn't tear itself. Jack moved, placing himself between her and the men. She fell, he said, his tone icy. Anyone with sense can see that. Oh, I see plenty, Vince sneered. I see a woman who knows how to get attention. Bet she pulled the same tricks in whatever saloon she crawled out of. The room went deadly still. Clara could feel the tension rising off Jack like heat from a forge. Watch your mouth, Morgan, he warned. Or what? Vince taunted. You gonna defend her honor? What honor? A woman shows up with no past, no references, no family. What does that tell you? That she's got more backbone than any man who'd insult her. Jack snapped. Clara stepped forward before the fight could spark. Her voice was quiet but steady. You're right, Mr. Morgan, she said. You have seen my type before. The kind of woman who works hard, earns her keep, and asks only respect in return. If that threatens you, maybe that's something you need to think about. Vince's face flushed dark red. "Listen here, you. That's enough." Samuel Morse's voice cracked through the tension like a rifle shot. The foreman stood in the doorway, taking in the flour, the torn dress, and the fury in Jack's eyes. "Morgan, Harrison, Cleveland. Out, now." The men slunk out, muttering under their breath. Vince shot one last venomous look at Clara before disappearing. "Miss Edison," Morse said gruffly, "get yourself cleaned up. Supper's in 2 hours." His gaze shifted to Jack. "Roosevelt, a word." When they were gone, Clara sank onto a stool, her hands trembling as the adrenaline faded. Jack's coat still hung around her shoulders, warm and heavy. The air smelled of smoke and flour and something else, something she didn't want to name. By the time she changed and returned to her duties, the story had already spread. Whispers followed her through the evening like wind through dry grass. Some men looked away in shame, others stared openly, their smirks telling her they'd already chosen which version to believe. Jack didn't come to supper. Heard Roosevelt got a talking to from Morse. Vince said loudly over dinner, "Boss don't tolerate fraternizing with the help, especially not the female help." "The lady's been working hard and keeping this place running," Theodore Sherman said, his voice calm but firm. "That's worth respect." "Depends on the lady," Vince muttered. Clara set down a tray of beef stew with a thump that made the plates rattle. "The beef's tough tonight," she said sweetly. "Much like this conversation, maybe both would improve with less hot air." A few men chuckled. Vince didn't, but he stayed quiet after that. Later, when the kitchen was empty, Clara was scrubbing the last of the pots when she heard slow footsteps on the porch. The door creaked open, and Jack stepped inside, hat in hand. "Morse says I'm to apologize," he said, "for causing a scene earlier." "You didn't cause anything," Clara replied, her back to him. "I'm the one who fell." "That's what I told him." He paused, then stepped closer. "But what Morgan said, he shouldn't have." Clara turned, drying her hands on her apron. "Men like him always find something to say about women like me." "You're not like that," Jack said sharply, then softened. "You don't owe anyone explanations." "No," she said quietly, "but you look like you're waiting for one." Jack hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "I knew a girl once. Back in Kansas. She worked at a boarding house, honest work. But people talked. Made assumptions. I watched her reputation get torn apart, and I didn't speak up." Clara's heart skipped. "What happened to her?" "She left town. I heard she went west." His eyes met hers, filled with something she couldn't read. "I should have defended her. Should have done something." Clara turned away, gripping the edge of the sink. "We all have things we should have done differently, Mr. Roosevelt." Quote, "Jack," he said softly. She hesitated, then repeated, "Jack." The name felt solid on her tongue. "Thank you for the coat," she said, "and for standing up for me. But you should keep your distance. Vince is looking for trouble." "Let him look," Jack said. "You don't understand." "I understand plenty," he interrupted. "You work harder than anyone here. You treat people decent, even when they don't deserve it. You're trying to build something good. That's enough for me." "And what if Vince is right?" The words escaped before she could stop them. "What if I'm not the respectable woman you think I am?" Jack stepped closer. His voice was low, gentle. "Then, I'd say you're even braver than I thought. Takes courage to leave one life behind and start another." Her throat tightened. "You should go," she whispered. "If someone sees you here." "Tomorrow's Saturday," he said. "Some of us ride into town for supplies. You should come. You need fabric for a new dress." Morse approved it. Clara blinked in surprise. "Purely business?" "Purely business," he said with a faint smile. "Think about it." After he left, she stood alone in the quiet kitchen, his words echoing. Takes courage to leave one life behind. Did he know? Had he recognized her from that terrible night in Cheyenne, the night she'd barely escaped with her dignity intact? The night she remembered a man with gray eyes sitting in the corner, watching but not joining in? Lord help her, she thought. He knew. The next morning dawned bright and cold. Clara hadn't slept. But when she saw the wagon waiting and Jack standing beside it, steady as ever, she made her choice. "Purely business," she said as she climbed up beside him. "Purely business," he agreed, but there was warmth in his eyes she couldn't ignore. The road to town stretched ahead, dusty, endless, and full of what-ifs. For the first time in years, Clara felt the faint stirrings of something she'd long thought lost: hope. The ride to town took 3 hours through country so wide and beautiful it made Clara's chest ache. Rolling hills stretched into golden valleys, the mountains beyond them standing like silent guards. Jack handled the reins with easy confidence, and for the first time in a long while, Clara allowed herself to simply breathe. "You're not from Montana," Jack said after a while, his tone casual but curious. "No, Illinois originally," she replied. "My parents died when I was 15. I went to live with an aunt who didn't want me there. I learned quick that being unwanted is its own kind of hunger." Jack glanced at her. "That's young to be alone in the world." "Young or old," she said softly, "alone feels the same." He nodded, the silence between them comfortable. "I'm from Kansas myself. My father wanted me to take over the family spread. I didn't fit his idea of a good son, so I left." Quote. She smiled faintly. "Seems we both got good at leaving." They reached town by mid-morning. Cedar Falls was little more than a main street of false-fronted buildings and wooden sidewalks, but to Clara it felt like another world. Jack stopped in front of the general store. "I'll get the grain loaded," he said. "Take your time picking fabric." Quote. Inside, the shop smelled of soap and dried apples. Clara ran her hands over bolts of cloth, settling on a simple blue cotton, sturdy but still pretty. She was paying for it when she heard 2 women whispering nearby. "That's her, ain't it?" one murmured. "The new kitchen girl from the Callahan place." "Pretty thing. Heard she worked saloons down in Cheyenne. My cousin says—" Clara forced her expression to stay calm, though her cheeks burned. She thanked the shopkeeper and stepped outside into the bright sunlight, clutching her parcel tight. Jack was waiting by the wagon, loading the last sack. His eyes softened when he saw her. "Get what you needed?" "Yes," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Let's go." But instead of heading home, Jack guided the horses to a small cafe at the end of the street. "I thought you might want a meal you didn't have to cook," he said, climbing down to tie the horses. "Jack," she whispered, "people are already talking." "Then let them talk," he said simply. "You deserve to eat like a civilized person, not hide in a kitchen." Quote. Inside the cafe was quiet. Just an elderly couple and a traveling salesman at the counter. Jack pulled out her chair. The gesture was simple, respectful, but it made her heart twist. They ordered stew and coffee, and for a while neither spoke. Clara watched him over the rim of her cup, wondering what kind of man risked his reputation for a woman with one already half ruined. Finally, she said, "That night in Kansas, the girl at the boarding house, was that really why you left?" Quote. Jack looked down at his hands. "Partly. My father wanted me to marry the banker's daughter. Good family, good match. But I kept thinking about that girl, how the town destroyed her for no reason except being poor and alone. I didn't want any part of a world like that." "So you ran," Clara said. He looked up. "So I ran." The weight of his words hung between them. Clara knew then what she hadn't dared to believe. He remembered. When they stopped at the post office, her fears were confirmed. Vince Morgan was there, grinning like a fox when he saw them. "Well, well," Vince said loudly. "Roosevelt playing gentleman now? Ain't that sweet? Miss Edison, you ever make it down to Cheyenne? Seems to me I've seen you somewhere before." Clara froze. "I've worked in many towns, Mr. Morgan. I doubt you'd remember them all." "Oh, I remember the Rosebud Saloon," Vince said, his voice dripping with malice. "My friend swears there was a girl looked just like you, except she went by another name." Jack stepped forward, his jaw tight. "That's enough?" "Just making conversation," Vince said with a laugh. "See you back at the ranch." He left, still grinning. Clara felt her insides twist. The air around her seemed colder, thinner. In the wagon, silence stretched between them until Jack finally said, "It doesn't matter what he thinks." "It will," Clara whispered, "when his poison spreads. It always does." Jack stopped the horses on the empty road, turning to face her fully. "I was there," he said quietly. Clara's breath caught. "That night at the Rosebud," Jack continued, voice rough, "I saw what happened, how those men cornered you, how you fought them off, how the owner threw you out for causing trouble." She stared at him, the world narrowing to his face. "You saw, and you did nothing." "I told myself it wasn't my business," he said, shame heavy in his voice. "I've regretted it every day since." She looked away, eyes burning. "Why didn't you say something when I came here?" "Because you deserved a fresh start," he said softly. "Without someone dragging up what you left behind." Clara swallowed hard, her throat tight. He had seen her at her lowest, humiliated and terrified. And yet, he still looked at her now as though she were worth saving. "We've all done things we regret," she said finally. "The question is what we do next." Jack nodded slowly. "What we do next," he said, taking the reins again, "is go back and face whatever comes, together." When they returned, the whispers were already waiting. Word of Vince's comment spread faster than wildfire. Some men looked at her with pity, others with suspicion. Jack took most of the work outside the main house, staying busy, but never far from reach. Days passed like that, until one night, the quiet broke. Clara was kneading bread when the door creaked open. Vince Morgan stumbled in, reeking of whiskey. "Working late again?" he slurred. "Such a dedicated little worker." "The kitchen's closed, Mr. Morgan," she said evenly. "Breakfast is at dawn." He took a step closer, smile turning mean. "Oh, don't be unfriendly, sweetheart. We could talk about old times." "There are no old times between us." "Funny," he said, grabbing her arm. "That's not what they said in Cheyenne." Clara jerked away. "Don't touch me." He sneered. "Or what? You'll cry to Roosevelt? He ain't here." The door slammed open so hard it rattled the walls. Jack stood there, eyes blazing. "Step away from her." Vince turned, unsteady. "Her knight in shining spurs! You defending her honor, Roosevelt? What honor?" Jack's fist caught him square in the jaw. Vince hit the table, sending dishes flying. He came up snarling, and they crashed together again, trading heavy blows. "Stop!" Clara cried, but it was too late. Other men rushed in, dragging them apart. Morse appeared, his voice like thunder. "What in blazes is going on?" Vince was drunk and grabbing at her. Jack said, blood on his lip. "He's lying!" Vince shouted. "She wanted it, same as she wanted it back in Cheyenne." Morse's face hardened. "Enough. Morgan, you're off this ranch at first light. You've worn out your welcome." "You'll regret this," Vince spat, clutching his jaw. "You can't protect her forever." But he was wrong. Clara wasn't the same woman she'd been in Cheyenne. She wasn't helpless anymore. She turned to Morse. "Thank you," she said quietly. Morse nodded once. "You've worked hard here, Miss Edison. That's all that matters." When the room cleared, Jack stood silent, his knuckles bleeding. "You didn't have to fight for me," she said softly. "Yes, I did," he replied. "I couldn't let him take one more thing from you." Her eyes filled with tears she hadn't meant to shed. "I'm not your burden, Jack." He shook his head. "No, Clara, you're my reason." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then she stepped closer, close enough to smell the smoke and sweat on him, close enough to feel the storm still shaking through him. Outside, the wind howled across the dark Montana plains. But inside the kitchen, something gentler stirred, something that felt dangerously like peace. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of love.